Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a beautiful and brand new day. It's a gorgeous day here in the Enchanted Forest. Even though it's raining and it's a little chilly, it's still a beautiful day. I guess it's all in how we look at it, isn't it? It's a beautiful day. We're all alive. We're breathing. We're together. Good morning, Linda. Good morning, Kimberly. Here we are. A new day, a new opportunity here on Grandmother Earth to nurture this journey that we've all decided to take at a higher level, soul conscious level. We all agreed to come here at this time. Good morning, Lori. Good morning, Angie. And I'm really happy that we all decided to do this together. The chat room is open. Please feel free to come on in. Hey, Katie. I'm looking at all the wonderful names in the chat room attached to some pretty fabulous people, some amazingly shiny souls that agreed, like I did long time ago, that we would come here during this time of change on Grandmother Earth, of an unweaving and a reweaving. It reminds me of my dear friend Amantha Murphy. And I'm so excited to say that she's got a book coming out early next year, and I just received the manuscript from the publisher. Amantha has asked me to endorse her work, and so I get to have a preview of her work. And we all know that she teaches about the weave from the Irish shamanic perspective. And I think we're all being asked to take a look at the weave from our own shamanic perspective, our own spiritual perspective and connection with Grandmother Earth and the spirit of Earth. And this morning, as I was thinking about the show that I wanted to do even further, I always plan ahead. Last week the show just didn't want to cooperate, and I honored that. Kimberly Wink and I had a great conversation together. She was able to tune in. But I honored the fact that whatever was to be spoken of last week was not to be spoken of apparently broadly, but in fact it was to be expanded. And so it's about being awake and aware with healthy boundaries and spiritual discernment. That's the conversation for today. A lot of times people will ask me, Dana, this is a really wild ride we're all on this morning or this year. The past 5 years, the past 10 years, working our way up to the year 2020. And I always, in my own heart and my own mind, thought of 2020 as the year of clear vision and clearing anything from our vision that no longer needed to be visioned or to be seen in the seen or the unseen worlds. And it's about getting clear vision, getting clear perspective in 2020, that 2020 spiritual eyesight. And in order to do that, spiritual discernment and healthy boundaries are a must. People will ask me, Dana, this is a really wonky time we're living in. Do you believe that there's spiritual warfare going on? I do. I believe that there's spiritual warfare in the seen and the unseen worlds, dark grappling with light. And I believe that more than anything, however we think of spiritual warfare, I do believe that there's something of a shifting and a sifting that's going on, kind of like panning for gold when we let all of the other stuff, fall from the pan and we keep the gold, the nuggets of gold. And that does require discernment. It requires healthy boundaries with ourselves and with others, and in particular with spirit. Spirit comes in many forms. And hold on just a moment while I tend to Gabriel for half a second. Come here, buddy. He's my little studio partner, as you all know. And so every Wednesday, here we sit with one another in the studio, and sometimes he needs to be tended to. So, spiritual warfare, spiritual discernment. I've spent many years talking about the fact that the spiritual world and the physical world are both very real, and they are. I sometimes ask myself which is more real, the physical world or the spiritual world. Are they equally real? Is the physical world more real for others? Is the spiritual world more real for others? And do we choose that? Do people choose to see the physical world as more real, or are they asleep to spirit? Are there people that choose to dip more into the spiritual world because the physical world is just too much? And so they spend more time in the spiritual world? Or is it a combination of all of those things? I know at the very least, for me, the spiritual world is as real as the non-physical world, always has been. And at times, I would posit that it's more real for myself. And I am very aware and awake to that fact. And synchronicities, and paying attention to my dreams. And all the while enjoying the physical world, enjoying physicality, because I chose to have physicality. But I didn't choose to ignore spirit. And there are those people that only want to talk about spirit as it pertains to all the good stuff. I call that the fluffy, bunny, warm, cuddly stuff. And they don't want to talk about the challenges presented by spirit. It's just not comfortable to talk about, Dana, so do we have to talk about that? And I always say, well, you don't have to talk about that, but I do feel some responsibility for wanting to talk about that. And in particular, when we're walking through a time such as this, when there are so many challenges, initiations, opportunities for growth, for further discernment. I mean, how do you all feel about that? Those of you in the chat room. I'm very well aware that having healthy boundaries in the physical world is important. And the older I get, the more clear I become with my boundaries. And that's just for me because I'm just getting older. We all are. And I'm equally aware that it's really important to have boundaries in my spiritual world as well. What do I mean by that? Well, as you all know, I have this morning routine where I come into my space here and first and foremost, I honor my ancestors. Hey, everybody, says Janet Smith. Hello, Janet. So first thing, after I get out of bed, but even in bed, I'm welcoming the day. Thank you for this new day. And sometimes I'll sit and I'll think for a moment about the dream that I just had. I do believe that this time, this year, 2020, is also enhancing our clairvoyant vision, the 2020 vision of the third eye. Last night in my dream time, I was visited by my daddy, not the Sarge, but my daddy, Billy King. And in that dream, I met up with Waylon Jennings, and I am a Waylon Jennings fan. I love Waylon Jennings. But in this dream, Waylon Jennings met up with me, and he said, come on, I want to take you to my house. I said, okay, Waylon, let's go to your house. And when I got to his house, there were a bunch of people, and I noticed that, for those of you that like Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, right, Mr. Crosby was there. And I walked in and I looked at him and he said, you know me. And I said, I do know you. And when I listen to your music, it reminds me of my dad's, both of them, Vietnam veterans. And at that moment, David Crosby looked at me and said, look over there. And there was my dad, Billy King. Oh, he was looking rather dapper. And I looked at Mr. Crosby, and I said, there's a song that you sing that reminds me of him. And we sang it together. And I woke up knowing that the interaction that I had was very real. I understand that I'm awake and aware enough to know that in my dream time, both of those gentlemen, Waylon and my daddy, and in addition, Mr. Crosby paid a visit. And even as I was dreaming it, I was consciously aware that I was dreaming. But at the same time, I was having a sacred encounter. And there I found myself singing that song, Cost of Freedom. And I woke up thinking about that. And I woke up thinking to myself, isn't it amazing? This earthly life gives us the opportunity to not only have the earthly experience, but to have the experience of earth in tandem with our spiritual life, the world of spirit. And the boundaries and the discernment comes in the fact that before I go to bed at night, I make sure that I'm well dressed, that I'm prepared for sleep. So I don't have any usurpers, anyone gone a Viking that's going to come into my dreams to wreak a little havoc. I'm consciously awake and aware of that need to take care of myself before I sleep, and in the morning to get up with a heart full of gratitude and walk that way, but to also be mindful of my interactions during the day with spirit and with people. Kimberly Wink is saying, I completely agree, Dana. Last night's dream had several people from my past who are in spirit. It was a unique dream for me. Thank you for sharing that, Kimberly. You know, last night I began my series in honoring, walking, and working with the ancestors. And for anyone who wasn't there live and you'd still like to get in on that 6-week series, the video webinar archive recording will go out to everyone today, so you can still register for that and join us for the next 5 live sessions. It is potent work working with the ancestors, and so I had a dream last night about one of my ancestors. Kimberly was dreaming about people from her past. In this weave and reweave, enhanced weaving that's going on, it's really important for all of us, I believe, to be consciously awake and aware to even our thoughts, our perspective, spending time with spirit. And what spirit are you spending time with? Well, I'm pretty sure everyone gathered this morning is spending a lot of time with some pretty good spirit. And whatever that is for you, whomever that is for you. But what about those times that spirit comes calling from a realm more challenging, or one that is challenging to you? What about the people that come calling from a realm or an experience or a grouping that is a challenge or is challenging you? I think, this idea, I feel like I'm kind of rambling here. There are so many thoughts passing through my brain at this moment. This idea that just because we have a spiritual practice or we teach spiritual principles means that we need to always be the nice person, the nice gal, the nice guy, kind of tossed willy-nilly. Which way is the mop going to flop today? My dad, the Sarge, used to say that. Well, let's see which way the mop flops today. I think the idea that we have to be nice to the detriment of healthy boundaries and keeping ourselves healthy is not a good thing. How do you all feel about that? My friend Tony Charette not too long ago said to me, he and I were having this great conversation out at Reed's Lake here in Grand Rapids after he and I had just done some ceremony together. He's Anishinaabe, man. And he said to me, "You've got to stop being so effing nice to people." And he didn't use the short abbreviation of that. "You got to stop being so damn nice to people." And I looked at him and I said, "Is that your perspective of me?" He said, "It is my perspective of you." And I got to thinking about that. I said, who are you talking about specifically, Tony? And we had a long dialogue. "It's time for you to put on more of your warrior," he said to me. Interesting. How we view our friends, how we view things, how we view ourselves. People will just run over you or walk over you or barge in if you're too nice. Interesting. So stop being so nice. And I looked at him and I said, "Well, maybe I'm looked at as being really nice to you because you don't do any of those things. You don't barge in. You don't utilize me as a doormat. And so there's no need for me to be anything other than nice to you." Well, just because other people are nice to you, Dana, doesn't mean that they necessarily have the best intention set out for you. That's discernment as well. To which I said, "Tony, I'm intuitive enough to know that if somebody is pretending to be just nice, cordial, flattering, I'm intuitive enough to understand that as well. And while I may not proclaim it out loud, I know, and I act from that place of discernment." Oh, he looked at me. Oh. Sometimes speaking our truth doesn't come out the nicest. Absolutely, Lori, it doesn't. And it doesn't always win us friends in the spiritual realm or the physical realm when we are discerning and we act upon what it is that we discern. And how do we discern? For me, discerning begins in my heart. I feel it. And I think that sometimes it also comes with having more years on the odometer of life, that we can sit with a situation and we can really take an honest look. Being awake and aware and having an honest look. Sometimes I extrapolate that into, well, a whole lot of things, actually. People who practice black magic, the dark arts, especially when I'm the person that's called to assist in somebody that has been affected by dark magic, black magic. And I call that my being called to do the psychic mop-up. And I sometimes wonder, how did you get into such a pickle that you found yourself with somebody working the dark arts or black magic with you? And, without judgment, but how did you find yourself there? Because that requires discernment, to not walk into that fire or into that relationship with people who are practicing the dark arts. How did that happen? Let's talk about that. Where did the discernment go awry? Or where did the discernment not happen? Let's talk about that. And let's talk about then healthy boundaries with spirituality. Because sometimes we can be drawn into. The darkness sometimes can be very exotic, erotic, and we can be drawn into that. And there are experiences to be had, I suppose. I've not ever been a practitioner of the dark arts. It seems that I've spent most of my life holding up the other pillar. It can be very seductive, the darkness. The power of the dark can be very seductive. And with anything, it all has consequences. How do you feel about that? Have you ever had that dance with the dark night, as I call it? Knight, the dance with the dark night. Discernment. And if, you've had the dance with the dark night, and the fact of the matter is you've learned some really valuable lessons about, I've done some dances with the dark night. I've witnessed it firsthand. It's come calling and knocking at my doorstep. It's done a pretty amazing job. I think one of the most astounding experiences with that actually happened in the Highlands of Scotland. And it was sent to me not from anyone in Scotland, but by someone here in North America. I just happened to be in Scotland when it was received. So what is it about holding the light? Sometimes holding the light in the darkness, not producing more darkness, being a practitioner of the darkness, but what is it about holding the light even in the darkness? Because I do believe that the greatest lights, the brightest lights, are called into the darkest places. And I do believe that the greatest teachers walk through the deepest fires, the greatest fires. And what is it about coming to the earth plane to hold the light, even in the darkest places or through the darkest experiences? That's an interesting thought. Years ago, when my spiritual director and I had a conversation about discernment, you'll have many experiences in your life, and you need to discern the dark from the light. And I'm not talking about personal shadow work. You need to discern which is which. And if you end up finding yourself in a darkened place, always remember your light. Do not succumb to more darkness. Remember to turn on your own light. I think that that's probably the greatest vehicle for discernment that we have. And yet when we turn on our own light, sometimes what we see are things that we don't want to see. Have you ever had that happen? When you sit for a minute and you say, wait, there's just something not right about this camel ride, as Hafiz writes. I love the Sufi poet Hafiz. There's just something that's just not right about this camel ride. And we can go a lot of years without really discerning. We just go along for the camel ride. And then one day we say, there's just something wrong here, and I'm actually going to stop. And I'm going to turn some light on, and I'm going to see. What's here? What's the rock in my shoe? And sometimes when we turn on that light, we see things. We understand things that we don't want to see. We never wanted to see. We never wanted to understand. And maybe we didn't because it was just the goodness in our own heart or the goodness of our own nature that we walked 1,000 miles with that pebble in our shoe, even though it was niggling us the whole time. The saddle had a burr in it. We just kept putting another blanket over the burr and kept on riding. Whatever. Discernment and healthy boundaries means that we turn on our own light of discernment, our own cognitive abilities, of course, but our intuition. And it doesn't always reveal what it is that we want to see, but it does reveal what we need to see. Sometimes what we are required to see along our path. And whether or not we address it, well, that's entirely up to us, isn't it? I tend to address things, particularly as I get older. I address things. I ask questions. I set a healthy boundary. And the same is true in our spiritual practice when we're working with spirit. What spirits are we working with? Why are we working with that particular spirituality? It's not always easy to carry the light into the darkened places and come out. We tend to get a few more wrinkles, a few more gray hairs that we have to cover up. Thank you, Redkin. Or not cover them up. And I think there's a wonderful part of spiritual discernment that tells us that we've learned what we needed to learn from an experience, from a person, from a community. And discernment says, okay, my time is up. Sometimes those can be really difficult. For years, I belonged to a spiritual community. And for years, I just, put up with the status quo of that spiritual community until Spirit made it so painfully obvious to me that I could no longer be a member, an active member. I couldn't do it anymore. It was too painful. And I sat with that discernment because sometimes we discern when Spirit or our higher self, that which is closer to Creator than all, that part that dwells with Creator says, okay, we're going to make this so painful to you that discerning really isn't required. Just listen to the pain. And I separated myself. And I've had to do that a couple of times, 3, 4, 5 times in my lifetime, to separate myself, to set a boundary that I cannot be part of this any longer. Anything that is hurtful to other human beings, I can't be part of that. I won't be part of that. And to set that boundary, I can't be part of that relationship or group of relationships. That's discernment. And all along, our spiritual helpers are saying, geez, are you getting it now? Are you understanding? And the human consciousness says, I don't want to understand that. No. And then the light goes on. And what do we do with that? Do we continue to just go along? Putting our foot down and saying no more doesn't make us popular, Lori. You are so right about that. And yet, this is how we continue to grow in our own strength and our own fortitude. Because remember, the deeper and the stronger our roots are here on Grandmother Earth, our ability to stretch ourselves into the ethers, into the realms of sacred, grows exponentially. If we can't even set a healthy boundary here on Grandmother, how are we possibly going to travel the spiritual realms safely, to have those connections in a good way? Well, I don't believe that we can. And that's just me being me. And I think that that's why, long time ago, there were like hermits and hermitesses. So they didn't have to deal with having to discern the outside world. They just had to discern the world of spirit, which is a job in and of itself. But again, for me, it's always with my heart. Something isn't right with this. What is it? Let's have a conversation about it. Let's put that down. I mean, how do you feel about that, everybody? Am I just rambling? I'm probably just rambling. People will say to me, Dee, when you're doing a session with somebody, how do you know that the spirit that's coming in, the spirits that are coming in to visit you are good spirits? How do you really know that? Well, after all these years, I kind of have a clue. I have a definite clue. In discernment, spiritual discernment, the posers from the non-posers. But I always do my work with spirit just as I do my work in my physical life. I set the table. Before I teach, before I do this podcast, I'm sitting in sacred space. When I get my body ready during the morning hours to get out and head out to the day, I take my time to put clothes on, put a little lip gloss on, brush my hair, brush my teeth. I set a sacred space for my body to go out into the day. I arm myself in gratitude. I call in my helpers from the realms of the angelics, the realms of light, to be present with me. Lori is saying, so true. For me, it was coming to terms that my career within the criminal justice system needed to, and before my awakening couldn't truly happen, needed to end, and before my awakening could truly, oh, that's right. For me, it was coming to terms that my career within the criminal justice system needed to end before my awakening could truly happen. Yeah, sometimes it comes like that, discerning when the job needs to change, when the job is growing into something more. Thank you for bringing that up, Lori. Discerning when we're done with a career as it is, or a career entirely. I always believed, and I still believe, I know, that each and every one of us has a signature light. We have our own sigil. It's called our name. It's called our unique light. That is needed perhaps in more than one place of employment during a lifetime. Our light is needed where we bring it, where it's called to. I believe that. And sometimes our spiritual light grows when we finally have the courage to leave and go to the next. Yeah. Kimberly is saying, true, for me, it is an ongoing evolution. Weirdly, I am always surprised in a good way when the support I ask for shows up. Right on, Kimberly. Help me move through this. Help me get to the next and the evolution. What I teach right now in the year 2020 is quite different than what I was teaching when I began really teaching in 1997, actually. It's different. It's evolved. As I've evolved, as Spirit has said, okay, Dana, it's time for you to teach this. Because there were years that I wanted to teach a subject matter such as honoring, walking, and working with the ancestors. And my guides and helpers said to me, it's not time. It is not time to teach soul minding. It's not time to teach about ancestral work. Just keep learning, keep recording, keep taking notes, and the time will come. And it did. Nikki. Hey, Nikki, up there at the Heartful Art Studio. I totally get it, she says. I questioned a gut feeling I had for a long time about a situation, even when everyone told me nothing was off. And the situation showed its true colors, and my gut was right. I literally felt sick to my stomach for a few days, as I felt betrayed, like I betrayed myself. But to later realize I needed that feeling to not distrust my gut feeling again. Bravo, Nikki. Sometimes we have to have that punch in the gut so that later on we can recognize it. Oh, there it is again. Pay attention to chakra number 3. Pay attention to that solar plexus, our inner sun. Great. Thank you for adding that, Nikki. Yeah. For me, says Angie, many times I have to help my husband, since he is so trusting, to remind him that he needs to say no and that it is okay. That is so true. Angie is married to one of the kindest men. He is so kind. And people love him for his kindness. And because he's a good man. Bruce is such a good man. But he's kind. And that can be used and abused. Have you ever felt that way? And I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think, Nikki, to your point as well, sometimes we can be so kind that people flock to us. And we're so kind to our own detriment. And the moment that we kind of put the brakes on being so kind all the time, that rattles cages. Particularly, I believe, in spiritual groups, where people can be expected to fix everything for others. Well, he's the fixer-upper. He'll fix it. He'll take care of it. She's the fixer-upper. Kimberly fixes everybody's stuff. Nikki just fixes stuff. So we'll just drop that on her doorstep and let her fix it up, and I won't be responsible for the outcome. They'll be responsible for my outcome. Have you ever had that, anybody? And when you say no, you can have your situation back, and it's time for you to manage it. You take care of that. That does not win popularity contests, and it probably lessens the number of friends that you have on Facebook or the people who follow you on Instagram, whatever that happens to be, for people who take either of those places too seriously. I don't take either one of those places seriously anymore at all. Probably 12 years ago I did, when I first joined Facebook. I thought, wow, this is really the bee's knees. And now I've learned that it's nothing of the sort. I don't take either or any of social media very seriously. At least for me, that was a big, major part of discernment for me, is to understand that place is a free-for-all. It's like the MMA, the mixed martial arts of getting together. The mixed martial arts of getting together socially is social media. At least in my mind. And there are some nuggets that happen, some great golden nuggets that happen in those places, but it really has digressed, I think. And discerning how much time do we need to spend there? How much effort do we put there? They will make sure it gets done. Check. Katie Battle is saying, yeah. And when you finally say, enough is enough. Years ago, when I first started pouring sweat lodges in Eat Bees, somebody very pointedly said to me, you do realize that for a lot of people who come to your sweat lodges, this is nothing more than a social gathering. and a way to say, hey, it's really cool that I go to sweat lodges. And it was somebody from out of town who had come in and had been to sweat lodge before. And I hadn't really noticed it. And that particular evening, I looked around and I watched it. And I watched what was going on outside. When I'm pouring sweat lodge, I'm so busy and ensconced in making sure ceremony is being set up properly, that the table is being set, that I'm not watching what's going on out in the pantry or the hallway while I'm setting the table. What's happening out in that living room? And I watched. And I became awake and aware. And that was really eye-opening that night. Who was there for the spiritual food? And who was there to say, hey, I was there to be seen? And the same is true now with my classes. Who's there to receive the spiritual food? And who's there just because they ain't got nothing better to do, or to say that they did? And my sweat lodges and my NEP gatherings and my classes are very representative of that change. Amantha Murphy and I have had long conversations about that. Long conversations. Who's there for the spiritual food and who's there to say they did it? And who's there for malfeasant purposes? Wow, and when you sit and really think about it, or when I really sat to think about it, whew, and I acted upon it. And again, didn't win any popularity contests. Right? Who's there as the voyeur? And who's there to receive and to give? I think that question really can be applied to all aspects of our lives. Who's coming to receive? Who's coming to also give? Who's there to simply be a voyeur? Who's there to stir things up and act accordingly? Linda is saying there is an unpleasant consequence to feeding ego when entering NEP. Absolutely right, Lakota Wee. Katie's saying your sweat lodge is very clarifying. First time I went, I cried. It's not a place to take lightly. It isn't. And I looked around that particular evening, and when everyone left that evening, I sat as the fire was being put out. And I sat with that fire, the spirit of the fire and the spirit of the Hochoka. And to Kimberly's point, asked spirit to help correct the imbalance. Just to correct the imbalance. Not to judge. No judgment. Help me to correct the imbalance. This is what I now see. Help me to correct the imbalance, to bring it into harmony and balance as it should be. And spirit answers the call, and we have to pay attention. Wherever we need to become awake and aware, when we do become awake and aware and we need to set boundaries, With discernment, we don't have to do that alone. Spirit will assist us, our angels, our guides, our ancestors, our allies. Help me to correct the imbalance. Thank you for bringing those students to the school that wish to be fed and to feed and to walk with what I offer in a good way. And only those students. Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you for helping me to teach what it is that the students need to learn. Thank you. Thank you for helping me to be in balance. Thank you for bringing to ceremony at the INIP those that come in a good way. Thank you. Everyone else can stay home and watch Seinfeld. I don't know. But thank you for bringing those that wish to be with me in a good way so that my soul's avocation is not wasted. Thank you for bringing those friendships into my life that are nourishing and that I can nourish. Thank you for helping me to restore balance in my friendships, to discern what is a friendship and what is not. There's a good one. Carla Jo Worth has a great thing she does. I believe it's every new moon or full moon, or maybe both. Thank you for releasing me from anyone or anything that no longer needs me. I like that, and I employ that. I think that in discernment and boundaries, we really come to honor the sacredness of life, of course, the holy path of walking this holy cow life that we walk. But I also believe that it honors the spirit of joy. Why is that, Dana, that you think that dwindling down or refining or rebalancing? Because when we ask for the balance to be restored in our friendships, with our students, with the teachers that we all have teachers. When we ask for restoration of harmony and balance, we're released from the chaos, from the disharmony, from the constant wondering and worrying and nail biting about relationship or whatever that dissonance brings with it. And that leaves more room for joy, for gratitude and things to be grateful for. It brings more peace, the spirit of peace, the spirit of joy. I always think of our standing by the sidelines going, does she see it now? Does she see it clearly now? Nope, she's not quite seeing it, so let's make it a little more clear for her. She didn't trust it last time. Okay, we need to make it more obvious to her. Dana's a little thick in the skull sometimes. Oh, okay, there she sees it. She's now awake and aware. Oh, that's going to make her really sad for a little bit. Let's sit with her while she processes. Okay, now it's okay, we can enter. The spirit of joy and peacefulness and gratitude and friendship, true friendship, can now enter the room. That's how I think of it anyway. That's how I think of my Wednesday morning podcast. I think of it as a circle of light. Each and every one of you, wherever you happen to be from, holding the light, anchoring the light, walking this holy cow life, sacred life. going through your own processes of discernment, of boundaries, of awakenings, becoming consciously awake and aware, adding to the weave, sifting through, holding on to the nuggets, sharing those nuggets. I do believe that as we become awake and aware and we discern and we have boundaries, we give other people the okay, the green light to do the same. Discerning behaviors within our own families, behaviors within ourselves. I once asked Terry Ruel, I love Terry Ruel. So Terry, if you have a family member or a friend that you find has an offensive way of being or speaking or behaving in the world, how do you address that with them without further offending? And she said to me, well, tell them first and foremost how it makes you feel when they behave in that manner. It hurts my heart when I hear you say. It hurts my heart when I see you do. It hurts my heart when. And I got to thinking about that. That's a very wonderful way of presenting to somebody that you love how their behavior affects you, being honest in the way that it affects you. But what about being honest with ourselves? You know, Dana, it really does hurt your heart when this happens, and you keep allowing it. What are you going to do about that? Amen, says Lori. Love from Janet. What about when we ask our own heart? What's on your mind today? And we're not talking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. Long patterns, long held patterns, long recognized patterns. What is it Maya Angelou said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them? Asking the heart. The heart will tell us if we take the time to really listen. We do have brain cells in our heart, by the way. And I think they're there for a purpose. Helping us to bridge the mind with the brain, the divine mind with the brain. Thank you all for shining your lights the way that you do. Thank you for protecting your light and the light of your heart. We need the light of your heart. We need the light of your light in this world at this time. We need the light of your love at this time as we unweave and we reweave the earth as the ancestors told us would someday come to be. With that, everyone, have a beautiful day. Get out there and shine. Shine your light for yourself, and in doing so, you shine it for others. Take good care of your heart, your spiritual heart and your physical heart. They work together. Drink in the sunshine and let it flow through you. Blessings be, everybody. Have a beautiful day.